I turned 75 on a Tuesday in October. By noon, my family was in Rome. I know that sounds theatrical, but it wasn't. Nothing about that day felt dramatic while it was happening. That was part of the problem. Betrayal inside a family rarely arrives like a slammed door. Most of the time, it sounds like rolling suitcase wheels over hardwood floors and someone saying, "We'll celebrate properly when we get back." My husband kissed my forehead before leaving for the airport. "You hate long flights anyway," he said lightly, as if this had been my decision. I stood in the doorway holding the sleeve of my cardigan while my daughter adjusted her sunglasses and my son argued with the driver about luggage space. Nobody looked guilty. They looked rushed, excited, mildly inconvenienced. The trip had apparently been planned for months. I learned that the same morning. "We thought surprising you would be stressful," my daughter explained. "And honestly, Mom, Europe isn't really your thing. At 75, people begin rewriting you while you're still alive. Your preferences become assumptions. Your silence becomes agreement. Your patience becomes permission." After they left, the house became painfully orderly. 4 coffee cups still sat in the sink. My husband's newspaper was folded open on the dining table beside his reading glasses. I made myself lunch because I didn't know what else to do. Tomato soup from a carton, half a sandwich, one candle stuck into a bakery cupcake I bought for myself 2 days earlier. Outside, a neighbor was blowing leaves across the sidewalk. Inside, my phone kept lighting up with photographs from the airport lounge. Family adventure begins. My son had added a red heart under it. I remember staring at that word, family, as if I had become adjacent to my own life. I tried not to think about money at first. Retirement had always been ours. That was the language my husband, Walter, preferred. Shared decisions, shared future, shared sacrifice. Still, sometime during lunch, I opened my banking app. I wish I could say I discovered everything immediately. I didn't. Confusion comes before clarity. Numbers blurred together, transfers I didn't recognize, withdrawals larger than they should have been. I convinced myself there had to be explanations. 48 years of marriage trains you to protect the other person from your own suspicion. For 3 days, I said nothing. I watched Europe through their photographs, Walter smiling beside a river in Paris, my daughter holding shopping bags in Milan, my grandson eating expensive pastries with both hands. Nobody called me directly unless I initiated it first. The fourth morning, I went looking for our property tax folder, that's all. A simple, practical thing. Walter always kept paperwork in the small office upstairs. He organized everything in gray filing cabinets with handwritten labels nobody else understood. I was reaching behind one cabinet for an old envelope when my fingers brushed metal. A safe, not large, hidden into the wall behind accounting binders. I knew the code immediately. My birthday, not because he was sentimental. Because men like Walter choose passwords they assume women will never suspect are being used against them. Inside were folders, copies, deeds. There is a specific kind of coldness that arrives when confusion finally ends. I sat on the carpet for nearly an hour reading documents that explained my own marriage back to me in legal language, Pori transfers, investment accounts, a line of credit opened without discussion, letters from a financial advisor addressed only to Walter, and one document that hurt more than the others, a revised trust. Most of our assets had quietly been repositioned over the last 3 years, not illegally, not dramatically, carefully, like someone preparing an exit route while still eating dinner across from you every night. I didn't cry. That probably sounds unnatural, but exhaustion and grief are cousins. By 75, your body no longer wastes energy performing emotion for empty rooms. Instead, I made tea. Then I started reading everything more carefully. For the first time in years, I noticed patterns instead of incidents. Walter interrupting me whenever finances came up. My daughter saying, "Dad handles the complicated stuff." My own habit of nodding instead of asking another question. Silence can become a personality if you practice it long enough. The following Monday, I met with a financial advisor downtown. Not ours, mine. I almost canceled twice before entering the office. I still remember apologizing when I sat down, as though taking up professional time required justification. The young woman across from me listened without interrupting. She reviewed the document slowly, then looked up with an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Direct attention, not pity, not dismissal. "Attention. You still have options," she said calmly. Something inside me shifted then, not empowerment exactly, more like recognition. As though I had briefly disappeared from my own life and someone had finally confirmed I was still visible. An attorney followed 2 days later, then another meeting. Paperwork began moving quietly. Certain accounts required dual authorization now. Ownership structures changed. Access tightened legally. Nobody in Europe noticed. They continued posting photographs. One evening, Walter sent me a picture of the Trevi fountain. "Wish you were here." I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone without replying. When they returned 11 days later, I was watering plants in the backyard. I heard luggage first, then laughter. My daughter entered the kitchen mid-sentence before stopping. Walter followed behind her. Something about the house felt different immediately, not emotionally. Structurally, the office door upstairs was locked. The joint account attached to Walter's business expenses had been frozen pending review. The attorney's folder sat centered on the dining table, no note attached. Walter opened it standing up. I watched his face lose color gradually, not dramatically. Confusion first, then calculation. My son looked between us. What is this? I remember drying my hands carefully before answering. It's information, I said. Walter finally looked directly at me then, really looked not as background, not as routine, not as someone who would quietly absorb discomfort to preserve everyone else's convenience. His voice lowered immediately. We should discuss this privately. We've had 48 years of private discussions, I said. I think that's enough. Nobody shouted. That's the part people never understand when they imagine these moments. Real power rarely arrives loudly. By then, the loud part is already over. Over the next few weeks, the house became polite, painfully polite. My daughter began calling more often, though every conversation sounded cautious now. My son stayed defensive. Walter alternated between apology and negotiation depending on the day, but something irreversible had happened, not revenge. Distance, I stopped translating other people's comfort into my responsibility. One morning in November, I made breakfast for one again. Same kitchen, same silence, but it no longer felt like abandonment, it felt like ownership.